This place is magnificent. This place is psych.
What is your comment?
Well, I was just going to tell Nick, in the future when debating Dinesh, just say, do not redeem the card!
All right, enough. I know it's all big joke. It's all big, whatever. Exactly what we're talking about.
What matters is that you know in your hearts that today you are that kingdom united. You are England. Each and every one of you. England is you. And it is the space between you. Fight not for yourselves. Fight for that space. Fill that space. Make it tissue. Make it mass. Make it impenetrable. Make it yours. Make it England. Make it England.
Good evening and salutations, everyone. This is your weekly Warcast with Alex co-piloting tonight here. Forgot to change the background there, but that's fine. We'll just leave Doom guy there. Yeah, so what do we have to talk about? We have a few things off the bat I want to address. Tonight's show is going to be covering the usual stuff. We have some cartel footage and a few other things. And I wanted to also mention next week I will be indisposed, so probably won't be a show next week, just due to the length of the activity I have to partake in. Will run into Monday, so won't have a show next week. I'll see you about a week after that if we have a show or not, but I'll let you guys know in the public chat and on the Warcast channel on Twitter and Telegram. As far as donations go, still haven't got anything set up yet on Odyssey or Buy Me a Coffee. And yeah, for anyone that's new, this is your Warcast. We cover topics including conflict, politics, economics, philosophy, activism, kind of a gambit of everything, and with an emphasis on Ukraine and white activism, whatever you want to call it. Recently, want to kind of segue into a few other things here, guys. Rob Rundo came back, and I wanted to talk a bit about that. But we are broadcasting tonight on Odyssey, Entropy, Rumble, trying to get on YouTube. YouTube's acting weird. DLive and Twitter/X. So I'll give you a couple shout outs there in a minute, but I want to talk about Rundo first. He did a recent episode, his first episode, was it yesterday? No, the 5th. So, sorry, 2 days ago. I'll put that in the Odyssey chat here, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So he talked about his time in Bulgaria and his time in Romania and getting caught by the Romanian police. Very interesting stuff to really talk about, and a lot of his experiences can be something we all learn from. And I think it's something that, as a wider movement outside of Ukraine, really hasn't had any experience as much as Rob Rundo has had. And it's a gift for us to learn from his experience, because we haven't had anything like that in decades, really, where we had a man running between countries, evading the police for 6 years. So, really give that a recommendation. But also for our loyal chat and viewers, on that link there, I gave him an invite to come on to our show. And I would like you guys to go over and reply or comment on that stream and like that comment we have in his channel there. That way we can get him on and probably talk to him if he would be so inclined. Yeah, that's something I would like to have on the show, and I'm hopefully he would be more than kind enough to grace us with his presence. So, what else we got? I also have, yeah, there's also a bit of interesting stuff coming out of another content creator. I don't really start drama too much because we saw what that happened. What was that, last night? When D brought up, was it Night Nation Review? We started getting spamming bots in our chat. That was a lot of fun to censor. Um, but do you think I should mention them by name, Alex?
The bots or what?
No, the statement you forwarded about isolationism and all that crap.
Oh, I don't know if you want. It's up to you.
Yeah,
It was just an offhand kind of thing.
It's an offhand sort of thing, yeah, but it was interesting nonetheless.
Not the one I take seriously.
Okay, yeah. So an unserious. They train themselves seriously, but they do LARP a lot. Credit to where they do train frequently, but at the same time, the orientation of their activism is based on the usual American isolationism and all this stuff, though. So I just tossed in their comment section about what was it that Hitler said? You know, in this world where, you know, fighting for your life is the natural state, if those that do not fight are doomed to perish, that sort of thing. I know I'm butchering that quote there, but we're in that current phase in history again where these things are coming for us. Finding refuge and isolationism is not going to keep you safe. The world will come to you whether you like it or not. And this is a common thing we've had discussions on respectfully with Gordon from Amerikaner. And I think we talked it out pretty amicably, as heated as it got. But at the same time, this is a recurring theme in the American scene where Americans feel that they're privileged and separate from the European brothers in blood and soil. Obviously, we take a different point of view on that on this show about it. And the statement was related to military service and a lot of other things related to Europeans. Um, Needless to say, with our connections with men and brothers over there in Ukraine, they've taken it upon themselves to volunteer and defend a white nation. Um, that is the future of the way the West has to survive. It's not going to be hinging on refuge and ignoring the way the world works right now. The world will come for us nonetheless if we just try to ignore it also, because the world cares about what we have and what we will do or not do. I think that's imperative to understand in this sort of context of the world we live in, because if we do not fight for what is ours and our own, then we will be doomed to lose it. And that's the argument I have against a lot of people that want to hide away from the world right now. I know there's a lot of frustration, and justified frustration. I'm on board when people say, after 20 years of fighting in a sandbox and having our brothers get killed and shit over bullshit, um, they are right to be frustrated and not want to do that sort of thing. That's the sort of world we don't want to get in. But there's much bigger games at play that will involve white nations and our own people that we need to stand up and be willing to volunteer to fight them over there, so we don't have larger fights here. I know that sounds kind of corny at this point, but that's what we're doing in Ukraine, so we can keep the two nuclear Asian nations at bay in eastern Ukraine, so they're not fighting in Budapest, Bucharest, Warsaw, and Tallinn, Riga, Helsinki. Take your pick. These fights are going to be happening eventually, and us allowing Europe to languish and just eventually die is a, how to put it? It is us stepping away from our duty as nationalists, because our intersection between our ethnos is our race, and if one part of our race perishes, then that diminishes us all, as I've said before. And I want that to be understood by people here. I have to reiterate these things sometimes because we have to have a moral point of view in a lot of this, though, too, because people are trying to say it's the right thing just to hide. I find that very convenient for the lack of activity people might really try to do. To try to dress it up in virtue to do nothing. I find that kind of sad sometimes, but that's just me. You have any thoughts on that, Alex?
Yeah. I guess one of the problems of the internet is that any jackass who can get viral, can set up a camera tripod and be right about a lot of things, and then kind of get out of their lane and then start to sway to things like geopolitics.
Mm-hmm.
And once they build up that audience, they start to influence people who, I guess, are susceptible to being influenced by people on the internet and propaganda that is, I'm just gonna say, more aligned with the multipolar world or anti-Americanism, without even realizing it. So, yeah, pick your sources very carefully. And if someone always has a caveat at the beginning of their video that they're a professional retard, maybe you should take them at face value for that.
Yeah.
And I'm not, speaking in hypotheticals here. That this content creator does literally call themselves a professional retard. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think. I think he genuinely believes what he's saying. He just hasn't sat down and thought, what would happen if the United States, or just really the West, including Canada and Australia, of course, turtle up and into itself. What that would actually mean in reality. It's not going to be like everything just stays static and becomes happy dory. No, it's going to create a power vacuum, and I don't know if that's going to be inevitable at some point in the future, but I mean, it's best we do all we can to prevent that from happening in the first place, rather than just throw Europe and our allies in Australia and some other places in the world to the wolves, because some European politician or government was mean to the United States at some point in history. Like, that's just ridiculous.
That's the weird thing, is that it's tied up in this weird, like, well, they owe us for it's just Magaty regression at the same time. It's like, this isn't like your morality, dude. You're adopting a different code of ethics. Like, you're expecting reciprocity on geopolitics. Sometimes things work out better for the state in different ways that don't really affect you. Like, somehow they suddenly care about the amount of Bradleys we have sitting in the desert, because that's money that we own. This whole thing, we talked about this before. But yeah, it's nonsensical. It fails down to, again, being just libertarian. My money is my money. It's not yours. I'm not going to give you any. That's about as best as I could put it. But yeah, moving on from that, though, I just kind of want to touch on that a little bit, though, because it did pop up and it was worth noting. Talk about the no show next week, and I think that does it for most things. For anyone new coming on the show, we talked about that a little bit. Yeah, if you want to join our chat, that's over at t.me/ReaderRuin chat. The channel I post on most frequently is on Telegram at t.me/the Warcast, and over on X. And yeah, I think that does it for all the normal stuff in the monologue, if you want to call it that. All right, so I did see we are up on YouTube, but it is acting weird, so we'll leave it at that, because even I can't get in the chat for some reason. It's just weird. Yeah, so please like and share the show, guys. We grow when you share us out. Please engage chat. Just talk to me. Let's have a little fun. Joke if you got a joke. But yeah, so Lightning Patriot says, "What's this isolationism thing?" It's just the American idea that we could live on an island by ourselves unto ourselves, and we could just tell the world to fuck off. That used to be the way to think about things, but that's a very old idea. But even back then, Theodore Roosevelt, built the Great White Fleet to make sure that we didn't have anyone come over here. The world is completely different from back when he built that fleet. Missiles can reach anywhere in 30 minutes. Air transport is very easy, and while things are trending towards our favor in global sentiments and national sentiment, at the same time we have to address the reality of the environment that all of us live in. And that doesn't mean accepting America as it is right now. And often you hear the same argument, like, well, all Americans have to, just live here and say fuck Europeans. I'm like, well, what is an American? They'll say, well, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about white people. I'm like, yeah, I understand that, but that's not how America is right now, and I'm not going to forsaken my blood kin over in Europe, though. That's where we're from. We got people over in South Africa, over in Australia, New Zealand, a lot of other places, man. It's just like, don't be a fucking pussy, don't be a bitch, It doesn't mean support the state, because we're not patriots in that way. I'm sticking with the definition of patriotism as loyalty to the state, but nationalists care about their people, and that's what I'm talking about. Lightning patriots, just it's this is a problem with how inarticulate the right wing is, and especially the nationalist right wing. We can be very good on fitness training, some organization, all these things. But we are definitely inarticulate in our greater idea of what our struggle is. The left has the same problems, but theirs is much more like academic. Ours
They have way
has
more intellectuals to project their ideas.
Yeah, yeah.
At least for their dissident side of things, compared to us.
Yeah.
Where we have like 10 people, maybe, in the United States
yeah, and
who can hold a
okay.
PhD level discussion.
Yeah, and we're just a small family here on talking about these things, but we'll grow eventually, I'm sure. But at the same time, it doesn't mean we should not talk about these things amongst ourselves to at least understand where we could present these ideas and truth test them. My bad is the best way to put that. And our ideas, and make sure that they're presented to the greater audience in the world when they eventually do emerge. I feel that that's kind of one of the points of this show too at the same time, but I'm sorry, I'm getting all speculative here, but I'll leave it at that. I'm sure you guys are here for all the information I curated and the combat footage, which Alex was gracious enough to also do in the background. So we will get on with the show. Yeah, that's about it. All I got, I think. If anything else pops up, I'll autistically pull the bus over and we'll go on from there. So let me get up on OBS here, guys. I gotta do all the engineering stuff in the background, do my studio mode, and all the other stuff. Sorry, guys. PowerPoint. There we are. I gotta reorganize that. There we go. That should be good. And here we go. All right. So keeping it fairly modest again, I'm still trying to calibrate the amount of information I want to give to you guys. I'm going to try to keep it at 3 in-depth topics. Well, in-depth, I'm using air quotes here. And then we'll kind of talk briefly on all the other subjects here. So covering from the end of June to the first week of July. So we'll be covering a little bit of the follow-up on Israel here. I got 2 GIFs for you guys covering some satellite imagery over the Fordo nuclear facility, which was the underground one in a mountain. So as a response to all this, Iran has been cracking down on ethnic minorities in Iran and civil liberties in Iran too. They're conducting mass raids on Baha'i religious minorities, seizing materials and accusing them of espionage. There's been over 700 arrests since June 12th, reflecting expanded repression framed as counterintelligence, mainly because the Israelis have been using ethnic minorities against the Persians in this case to carry out drone attacks and targeting, all sort of thing. The International Atomic Energy Agency has been suspended. Sorry, their access to Iranian nuclear facilities has been suspended, but they're still in country. But it also appears that Iran is preparing to present damage assessments at Fordo. As you can see by these GIFs here, they're excavating on the right there, one of the impact points, and on the right here, you're seeing them covering up the spot where I think that was where the centrifuges were at. So they're doing a little bit of just trying to get in there too after the Israelis tried to bomb the road, the access road in this place. Anyway, but the what ICW is calling disinformation, they're saying that Iran's trying to downplay the damage of the U.S.-Israeli strikes. I think ICW is just revealing their politics again, but we really don't know until Iran comes out and presents some like physical evidence about it too, and we also get some third parties looking at the nuclear site. And in Baluchistan, Iran has been arresting over 50 Israeli-linked terrorists, supposedly some of the fighters over in southeastern Iran. So that's what's going on over there. In Africa, this was worth noting. We don't try to cover too much in Africa because it's Africa. It's just always a shit show. But there was another ebb in, how to put it, another increase, sorry, in jihadist activity in western Mali, which is where the Russian Africa Corps is taking over duties from Wagner. And we've reached a new, again, height in this, though. There was a simultaneous multi-front attack to the tune of like 7 of them over in western Mali, very close to Bamako, which is the capital of Mali. Sorry, they targeted military barracks, police stations, government offices, and industrial infrastructure. While they did lose all these engagements, and it was a tactical loss for them, but the strategic situation narrative has definitely shifted away from the idea of stability in Mali, and this means that Russia's security guarantee and strength as a security guarantor to all their allies is again weakening, because they were supposed to knock these guys out and secure Mali, at least on this side too, because people are familiar with Mali. There's a desert, there's a northern half of it which is desert, and more of a tropical temperate south. But now that these JNIM fighters are pushing west towards the border with Senegal, you kind of see the map right here a little bit, and that what that means is that they're pushing into more inhabited areas, and that means if they can start lodging themselves in these areas, they're going to start having more fighters eventually too, and this might present a critical situation where a large African state will become a ISIS caliphate in protos form, I guess. So anyway, it's interesting. But as far as the attacks went, the Malian army claims it killed 80 militants, including 30 in Kayes City right here on the left. While it was a tactical defeat, the army aimed to undermine the attacks aimed to undermine the junta, and the claims of stabilizing the country have been undermined. We talked about the geographic expansion there, and the security implications is that the Malian forces have launched more counter operations in Kayes in 2025 than the previous 2 years, which is signaling a growing urgency to the security situation in western Mali. So Mali kind of is, well, it depends on who you ask. Mali is probably the biggest country out of the Sahel 3. Um, but if that one goes, then Burkina Faso and Niger are definitely on the docket to be thrown or tossed out, though, too. Because I know the captain in Burkina Faso is the one all the blacks in America talk about, but Mali's, I think, definitely has the largest footprint of Russians in it, though, because it has the most resources. So Russia's standing to possibly lose another strategic ally, so to speak, if these attacks continue. So that's why it's also important. Okay, moving over to Ukraine, guys. So for borders, that again that includes everything outside the front, but also within Sumy and Belgorod and all the other areas around northern Ukraine. It was a drone strike on Novorossiysk, which was a naval drone attack. It was supposedly repelled against the Russian or by the Russians there, unfortunately, during July 5th and 6th. The Russian opposition outlet Astra and a Ukrainian reserve officer confirmed the strike, though preliminary footage suggests Russian air defenses repelled the attack. Sorry, it was air drones. My bad. There was also Russian assault, which is pressuring in Sumy still. Russian forces maintain a manpower advantage and are sustaining 300 to 400 daily losses in Sumy Oblast, according to Ukraine special sources. My bad. Suggesting high expenditure of reserves to maintain pressure in that area. They're dropping about 50 glide bombs per day in the Sumy sector, and Russian units are increasingly using Migla Sarmat robotic infantry complexes, which are integrated with electronic warfare, shielding them from Ukrainian drone surveillance. This is related to the BARS Sarmat. So BARS is, again, one of their reserve formations, and these guys specialize in electronic warfare. So it's a special purpose Russian drone unit formerly based in Zaporizhia. Was broken apart and sent part of it to Sumy Oblast, and they're trying to, again, adapt to the warfare in this area here with that attachment. The trend here, obviously, is that while it's not a major breakthrough axis, Russian activity may serve as a fixing effort, And the combination of daily high losses and minimal vehicle use and high drone and EW integration suggests Russia's using the border to fight out tech-based infantry tactics. Test out tech-based infantry tactics while also projecting pressure across the broader front. Okay, over towards Kharkiv, there's been an increase in activity in Vovchansk also. Ukrainian Battalion Chief of Staff reported on the 5th that Russian forces are occupying the Vovchansk aggregate plant in northern, or attempting to occupy it, sorry. And Russian forces are conducting frequent nighttime and dusk assaults. And there's a tactical shift here also. Instead of using 1 to 2 3-man fire teams, Russians are now assaulting in groups of up to 25 men, so a platoon-size element. And there are reports, these units are reportedly staging from underground infrastructure, including sewage and utility pipelines, to stockpile ammo and supplies, enabling concealed launch points for urban infiltration. And the trend here is just urban creep and concealment tactics, which we've seen in many urban areas with the Russians. They're using thermal camouflages and fiber optic drones also in this area. All right, over towards Luhansk. I'll show the map here a little bit because there have been some updates I want to cover just a little bit more in detail, piece by piece, as soon as we're done with covering the fronts here. The Russians have advanced a little bit in the Melove sector. Ukrainian intel reported that Russian forces have seized most of Melove and surrounding forest. The objective appears to be creating a bridgehead on the right bank of the Oskil River, enabling further advances towards Bolohivka and Odrane. And Russian forces are also probing westwards from Zarubinka and southward towards Ambarny, signaling a multi-sector pressure axis. There's also been a dispute of who really controls how much of that same city. Persistent Russian attacks the Liman sector. Ukrainian sources noted that Russian forces are accumulating between Oskil and Zarubits River, and elements of the 25th Combined Army from the Russians there. And the trend in this area is that Russians are continuing with river-based operational planning. In Luhansk, they are increasingly anchoring their assaults on river lines along the Oskil and Zarubits River and seeking to sustain sustainable salience rather than major breakouts. So, all right, the major front here is in Donetsk again, guys. Can I go over the broad strokes in this sector? Oh, sorry, I don't know why my mouse is doing that, but it is. Okay, anyway. Russian forces continue to push towards Pokrovsk. As you guys can see a little bit here, we'll show that a little bit better on the map once we get to it. The Russians have expanded the salient here a little bit. Just make sure OBS is tracking that here. There we go. They've widened the salient here, and they're trying to develop supporting salients here to basically create a crises event where the Ukrainians will have to pick where to deploy their forces to either towards the fortress belt cities, this sector here, or southwest of Pokrovsk. This is the much slow. Well, I'd arguably say, towards Turetsky and Konstantinivka is probably the slowest one, but this is the quickest expanding one right here. And while they are holding in front of Pokrovsk, it's developing into not an envelopment, but a turning tactic the Russians have been using so they can avoid urban combat again, like they've gotten bogged down in Toretsk and Chasiv Yar. They're hoping that the Ukrainians will pull back from Konstantinivka, abandoning the fortress city there. And by also doing this, they're hoping that they could avoid fighting in Mirnirod and Pokrovsk itself too. So that's their idea right now. We'll see how well the Ukrainians can hold them in that sector, but it's just been developing slowly. Russian pressure builds near Toretsk. Ukrainian General Staff confirmed that Russian forces are applying persistent assault pressure along the Toretsk, Druzhba, and Pivnichny line. And Russian forces are also seeking to break through the fortified urban zones by concentrating artillery and glide bomb strikes on key access roads. The operational use of salients and feints in this area. Russian forces are trying to expand their salient near Novoleksandrivka, to threaten Ukrainian logistics into Pokrovsk and from the west. They're trying to move up to this main line of communication right here slowly. They are still being held mostly around Dachne and I forgot the name of the other little village there. But they are trying to push north in that main arterial there. There's growing evidence of diversionary pushes towards Kharkov and Volodar intended to stretch Ukrainian defensive lines and prevent reinforcement at the Pokrovsk and Toretsk axis. These operations also involve motorized rifle units and barge reserve formations, suggesting this is a low-risk commitment strategy to maintain pressure without overextending. Ukraine counter battery is holding fire. Despite an ongoing aid pause, Ukrainian defenders have continued precision counter battery fire using existing stocks of Excalibur shells and Western artillery platforms. Um, that they're using Excalibur shells is interesting because those were at the beginning of the war had like a north of 90% hit rate. But those require GPS tracking because they're precision artillery munitions. They're very expensive. And if people remember, we were at the beginning of the show like 3 years ago looking at was it buy a rocket or buy me a rocket, whatever it was, or Simon, whatever it was. They were selling footage of Excalibur shells, and you could put your your saying on it, your name or whatever, and they would sign it and shoot it, and they would most likely hit artillery pieces on the Russian side or anything else they were shooting at. But the efficacy of these rounds has dropped down into, I think, below 10% on their functionality, so they're probably just using it as dumb shells at this point. But now that they're dipping that far into their stocks is telling. So the trend in the sector is grinding multi-axis pressure. This is definitely the Russian priority right now. There's Russian activity across Novoalexandrivka, Toretsk, Pavlivka, and Kharkove reveals an attempt to create local encirclement risks, disrupt Ukrainian force rotation, and preserve operational ambiguity. Just to say, well, are we going to Pokrovsk or Konstantinivka? This multi-pronged approach reflects Putin's long war doctrine: no single breakthrough, but simultaneous pressure points grinding towards strategic exhaustion of Ukraine. So in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, it's actually gotten a little bit more active, guys. Ukraine expands Dnipro foothold in the Krinky area again. I was rather surprised when I read this, though. So the Ukrainians are back in Krinky, which means that the islands between the right bank and and the left bank in that sector are being held by the Ukrainians because they have to have access to Krinky again. I was a little worried about the ambiguity of the sector for quite some time since the Ukrainians left Krinky, but see, I'm guessing based because they're putting that lodgement back in Krinky area that they hold the Delta Islands pretty well. Anyway, Ukraine's general staff confirmed Ukrainian forces continue to hold positions in Krinky Kozachi Laheri zone on the left bank of the Dnieper River. Ukrainian forces are increasingly using drone-guided artillery to target Russian infantry clusters as they advance, leading to high Russian casualties. Russia deploys high-end airborne units to Zaporizhzhia, which is interesting. The deployed elements of the 104th Guards Airborne Division, which was redeployed from southern Donetsk to Robotny to the Verbove line. Don't have a picture of that, but the Russians are trying to push towards Verbove also. So they're, again, just creating all these little crises Ukraine has to attend to. Ukrainian raids continue into the Robotny sector, so there's a bit of a counterattack units by the Ukrainians. Ukrainians continue to conduct small unit raids and artillery strikes east of Robotny, and reports indicate Ukrainian recon groups have re-entered parts of I'm so bad at this. Sorry, sometimes, guys. Novoprokopivka, and are disrupting Russian logistics with suicide drones and loitering munitions. There's Russian minefields are still really dense in this sector. And the trend over in this sector here, guys, is that there's still drone attritional battles, small-scale sabotage raids, and tactical river crossings continuing. So let me just turn that off really quick, and we'll go over to the map here really quickly, because I do want to talk about it a little bit. We haven't talked about the map in about 2 weeks, because it's just been a slow attritional war, and the Russian summer offensive, if you can call it that, hasn't really been that effective. They're still grinding forward slowly as always, but I kind of just wanted to touch on that a little bit, as I said already. So let me get over to OBS again and open that up. Sorry for the dead air. I know we gotta keep things stimulated while we do some engineering in the background here. Okay. Open that up. I'll get rid of the studio mode so Alex can look at it too. All right, let me get back to my window here. All right, so we'll do clockwise as usual, guys. We'll go from Sumy over to the south there also. All right, so nothing really out of new at Tekkino. The Ukrainians have expanded their foothold in the southeast of Tekkino a little bit, pushing into this area right here, but that's about it. Russia's still holding on to that little village. Um, yeah, the Ukrainians have still, again, depending on who you talk to, Yunikivka is still being held by the Ukrainians here. I heard different things about counterattacks and stuff like that, but the Russian defensive from Sumy into Sumy from Suja has been basically stopped. They're relying on attritional infantry tactics and nothing really worth mentioning here as far as them pushing into this ground line of communication here, which is safely behind Ukrainian lines. So, going over towards Vovchansk here, guys, a little bit of action here. Uh, the aggregate plant is right here. Based off the latest reports on this map, is that it's still contested, obviously. Nothing really new from the Russians pushing northeast or east of Tyke, and that is it in that sector. No bridging or anything like that. So here we go. This is Milove right here. Again, one of these little villages that's right across the border, and just kind of a what the Russians would call buffer zone. And they got this ring road that runs. Let me see, go a little bit. There you go. Get a better picture of it. This ring road that kind of runs around in this area, and why the Russians would just be able to jump across and capture Milove. I wouldn't imagine there's a whole lot of Ukrainians sitting there right now. But then the Russians infiltrating through the forests and taking up defensive positions with a lot of vegetation in front of them right here. So um, I don't know. That it's just a bit of a tit for tat between the Russians and the Ukrainians in some of these sectors, but there really isn't much for the Russians to go and grab after that. It's just a lot of open ground. The nearest major ground line communication would be Balka, but from Milove to Balka, that is over 20 kilometers. So not likely that they're going to make it there anytime soon. So won't worry about that too much. But nothing really new out of Dolvrichna. Kind of the same stuff as always. They did push a little bit more out into this area north of Dolvrichna into the forest there. And Ukraine's still holding to Zinkivka, but the Russians are still trying to get into Kupiansk. I think this is a recent push, but nothing too serious. Kindrashivka being contested with surrounding villages in support. Okay, nothing new out of Zarozove still being held by the Ukrainians. We did have some footage last week of the third assault from Nadia pushing into Ryhorodka. So I would imagine once this map's updated a little bit better, we'd probably see a little bit more of the Ukrainians in the village right here, though. And pushing on to the Novo-Lyubovka salient here. Nothing really new from last week either, from my understanding. It is unfortunately very large from what we've comfortably saying, but that is what the Russians are trying to do. And it looks like Terney is still contested, which is interesting, because the Ukrainians would have to push through Yampolivka to get to Terney here. So if Ukrainians can hold that and push into Novozadove, that will really fuck up the Russians' line of ground line of communication here in that sector. And nothing really new. We talked about last time the Russians pushing from Belhorivka. Sorry, it is pretty much confirmed that they've taken over pretty much most of the village after 3 years. So unfortunately, that was something that did happen, but the Ukraine's also counterattacked in a couple sectors here in this area too. Seversk being the linchpin in this whole sector between the south of the Serbyansk forest and a lot of the other areas front of Liman. Nothing really new at Chesiv Yar. Russians are leveling everything with artillery. Novopivnichny is still contested. Russians were trying to say that they're moving to Sevchenko, which is the last micro district of Chesiv Yar after 2-3 years they've been fighting this village here. And yeah, that would be interesting, but they still got a lot of other villages to push for before they get to Konstantinivka. Nothing new at Toretsk, but it does look like the northeast side of the village or town is pretty much secured by the Russians. They're successfully making pushes into these areas northeast of here. But southwest is still being held by 12th Azov, and they're holding this pocket here pretty well, but unfortunately to their right, the Russians do continue to push north very slowly, just to kind of, again, create these mutually reinforcing envelopments or dilemmas that they're trying to force on the Ukrainians. At this point, the Russians are trying to move into this urban area, trying to flank around this area here to get to these two ground line communications running into Pokrovsk. So again, towards Pishchane, Kotlane, and Udachne, Ukrainians are contesting this road right here, but if the Russians can push from the east to west here, and then I should imagine this road right here is probably being droned, that would create a lot of pressure on the Ukrainians in this area. But based off what we've seen with Syrskyi and Zelensky, they're not likely to abandon Pokrovsk too soon, because they do attach political points to places that have been in the fight for a very long time. So, Russians have been pushing in this area from Velko Novosilka a little bit, and they're trying to get into Pidharvlivka here a little bit too. And as far as like the Russians pushing in these Zaporizhzhia sector here, guys, they're trying to push into Orkiv here, and they did look like they took over Stepove, which was a major launch point for the 2023 counterattack, and also in Kamyansky here. The point is to push north of Vasilivka, which is a creek here going into the Dnieper River basin here, and trying to push a little bit more into Richny and get to this area right here, I imagine, and also to this ground communication, but they're just making ground to say they are. And over the last sector here, guys, over towards Krinky, the Ukrainians have made landing in Kozachny Lahiri and this sector here. So, which means that they control most of these islands, or at least the way into egress into that area too. So, which is good, because in a post-war scenario, the Ukrainians justifiably would need to control this river delta for their own waters, and also control the way the Crimean Canal connects to the rest of Crimea, which would have economic implications for the Russians in the post-war scenario. Anyway, let me just check on chat here really quick. I know that was a lot, but again, I'm trying to just kind of make this a bit more presentable over the long term. Okay, good to see you, Hadrian was right. Let's check on the other channels, and looks like everyone's just cool. All right, let's go over towards the rest of the presentation here. We've got just a few things in the headlines here, guys. Sorry, let me just double check everything here again. And let me go back to studio mode here. Oh, did you guys not see the map? No, okay, no, I closed it out, my bad. Okay, I was worried about that for a minute. Where's the PowerPoint? There it is, okay. All right, there we go. Okay, so, all right, guys, just to show you the graph here again, consistently what we've been seeing is an increase in the Russians' their volume of attacks, just these huge spikes meant to overwhelm the Ukraine air defenses. This is why we're probably seeing, just recently today, me and Alex were talking about before we came online. Let me just double check my account. President Trump said, quote, Putin is not a good guy. He's a bad guy. He's killed a lot of people. I don't think he respects me. And what that means is he was also saying how he wants to send over more equipment to Ukraine, which is interesting. So in a weird hindsight, this might be the reason for Trump's reaction, is that we're seeing so many more attacks on civilian targets by the Russians. And
or he was mean to him.
I guess, and that's the sad thing about though, dude. The motherfucker's so up at his own ass about things, which is why NATO Secretary General Rutte, whatever you want to call him, was calling Trump daddy. That was meant to like appease his ego, basically. Much less having, I think it was the Dutch royal family come out and grace him with their presence. This whole thing. Anyway, yeah, they also had sorry, Zelensky also said he had a productive talk with Trump and NATO. And this whole thing. So I mean, it's good that things are pushing in that direction away from Putin there, but unfortunately, we're seeing the efficacy of Russian strikes increase with the amount of volume that they're also putting out here. So it's definitely a higher trend. It's just getting worse and worse every week, unfortunately. So the largest Russian combined strike of the war on the night of July 3rd to 4th. Russian forces launched 350 Shahed drones and over 200 decoy and missile systems, including Kinzhal, Iskander, and Kalibr class missiles. Um, Kyiv was being the primary target, with civilian damage in Kivrod, Odessa, Poltava, and even embassies. The Polish and Chinese consulates were struck also. Yeah. Ukraine Air Force reported downing 268 drones, while 208 were jammed or suppressed by electronic warfare. And recovered drones included Chinese-made parts from the Suzhou Ekhod company, which is a dual-use tech support, which is imported by the Russians. The trend here shows that Russia's conducted 10 of the largest airstrikes since January 2025, showing a doctrinal pivot towards sheer volume saturation via Shaheeds, coupled with the ballistic missiles intended to penetrate weakened Patriot-based air defense layers. There was also a double tap strike, which I think we have in the combat footage here as footage also, which is what the Russians have been doing against first responders. Russia conducted deliberate follow-up strikes to kill emergency crews in Kharkiv and Kherson on July 6th. These tactics mirror urban counterinsurgency style warfare used in Syria and Chechnya and strongly indicate intentional civilian targeting. Strike locations also include military enlistment offices, marking the third such hit since June 30th. This is meant to disrupt Ukraine mobilization efforts, and it doesn't seem like it's really had the desired effect based off what I've heard from the Ukrainians. Of course, they'll present probably not the whole truth on this subject, but yeah, the Russians are synchronizing their attacks, obviously to terrify the public and to hinder Ukrainian mobilization, obviously because that's a major problem for the Ukrainians still. One that's not as bad as it used to be. It's not critical, but it's not healthy either, and we'll get to that in some detail later here in the mobilization section. But yeah, I don't know what to say about it, guys. It just fucking sucks. I don't know what to say. Deliberate targeting of white civilians. Um, on top of that, however, while we're talking about mobilization, the Russians are also trying to conceal their losses. We talked about this a little bit last week. But Rosstat, which is the Federal Russian Statistics Service, omitted all mortality data from its January to May 2025 socioeconomic situation in Russia report, which is the first since the full-scale invasion began. Previously, standard data such as monthly death figures, male excess mortality, and death by age groupings has been entirely withheld by their statistics service. This trend follows Russian demographic suppression, as seen with earlier discontinuation of draft-age male population stats and restrictions on war casualty reporting, which we also talked about. A war blogger trying to track down the body of a husband of a wife. Independent analysis and confirmations. Russian data analyst Dmitry Kolbak publicly confirmed that Rosstat refused multiple data requests, including monthly deaths for 2024 and early 2025 by date, and male excess mortality figures used by independent demographers to estimate true war casualties. And Kobach has previously published open source excess mortality models suggesting hundreds of thousands of unreported war-related deaths, particularly men between age of 20 to 40. Motivations behind the suppression is likely this is a data concealment to serve dual purposes, was to also obfuscate war losses ahead of future waves of mobilization or domestic political unrest, and was also masking broader demographic collapse, especially in the rural areas and ethnic minority regions, which are fronting a lot of frontline troops. Rosstat decisions coincides with revelations of intensifying draft efforts, use of foreign nationals and migrants in combat support roles, and expanded recruitment of prisoners and teenagers in occupied territories. I do have an article I want to briefly go over talking about the Luhansk Cossack Cadet Academy. I forgot the exact name, but in occupied Luhansk, previous Ukrainian teachers are now at this academy. training up Ukrainian youth to go and serve in the Russian army. This is breaking several rules of war, basically, but we live in anything but a civilized warfare age. Significance here demonstrates that the Kremlin leadership is deeply concerned about internal backlash from cumulative personal losses, and the concealment also undermines military transparency, fueling speculation that fatalities now exceed 500,000 total combat losses when combining Medusa and Media Zona estimates. Their latest reports say 160 to 165,000 dead with NATO projections. NATO suggesting about 1 million total casualties. I would safely say if it's NATO, well, British intel's been really good about that. I think NATO's kind of leveraging that in this case. Based off the KIA to wounded ratio, we could easily say, and the media zona stuff's always lagging because they have to go to every headstone and obituary and confirm it. 250,000 to likely 330,000 Russian dead at this point. Because again, it's based off that ratio of like 1 to 3, 1 to 4. So kind of that spectrum there. This reflects Russia's intent to control the perception of attrition even as it doubles down on long war doctrine. All right, this is the last real thing I wanted to dive in here with you guys a little bit. The operational shift towards envelopment tactics. I just kind of blew up that map here a little bit to kind of give you a better picture of Pokrovsk and Munarod and Mykolaiivka. So it's likely the Russians can also try to push and squeeze from the northeast and southwest into these urban areas if they choose to at this point. The front lines in front of Munarod and Pokrovsk are pretty well defended, but now that the Russians have gotten behind some of these trench lines in this sector right here, they could probably try to move to the southwest if they choose to move into urban combat. We'll see. Observe tactical evolution. Russian forces are replicating tactics used in Avdiivka, which was in February 2024, and Volodar in October 2024. There's a focus on gradual partial encirclements of urban strongholds and avoids costly frontal assaults in favor of gray zone flanking and infiltration via field networks, mainly the forced tree lines and that sort of thing. The current implementation in Donetsk. In the Pokrovsk sector, Russia is seeking to bypass Ukraine's fortress belt, a network of heavily fortified cities, by enveloping towns like Rudinsky, Dobropilia, and Novoaleksandrivka. Okay, I got that nailed down. Assaults are supported by dismounted infantry, motorcycles, and light drone formations, avoiding tank-heavy columns, and use of glide bombs, tear gas drones, which is another major thing that a lot of Europeans are finally taking notice of, is the illegal use of chemical warfare the Russians have been using so much. To soften and disorient entrenched Ukrainian defenders before encirclement pushes. The terrain and logistics considerations. The approach avoids direct crossings of high-risk zones like the Kliben Beek Reservoir and instead focuses on smaller river lines along the Kazeni Torets River. Russia is also attempting to create localized salients through fields and hamlets to cut Ukrainian ground line communications and force retreats by threat of envelopment, not brute force. And the doctrinal significance of this is that it represents a codified shift in Russian military thinking, where attrition and positional warfare have been institutionalized as the norm. And multiple Russian bloggers have echoed praise for the slow, systematic method as preferable to rapid but unsustainable blitzkrieg-type maneuvers. And the strategic implications for Ukraine and Russia is that it signals that the Russian general staff is preparing for a multi-year campaign to wear down Ukrainian defenses, and it also implies that Russia can accept months-long stalemates in one sector as long as minor advances are made elsewhere. This also emboldens Putin's theory of victory, which is slow gains and Western fatigue. And the emerging trend here is that operational planning, recruitment, and even training doctrine are increasingly aligned with the slow grind of encirclement model. And Russia is building a doctrine of protracted sieges and salients rather than seeking strategic breakthroughs at this point. All right. Bottom of the stack here, guys, for the headlines. There was some civilian and POW abuses documented by the UN. The UN Office of Humanitarian stuff, I can't remember that whole acronym, reports a 37% rise in civilian deaths versus last year, most from explosive weapons in cities. There's also been reported of 106 summary executions of Ukrainian POWs, with 35 confirmed between December and May. And Russia continues to whitewash its crimes while amplifying isolated Ukrainian misconduct reports, which is trying to which is distorting UN findings for propaganda use. A lot of these civilian deaths aside from the missile attacks we see in Kyiv and other cities like Kharkiv is a lot of drone drops in Kherson still. The Russians are deliberately still trying to sow terror and war fatigue in Kherson by just dropping grenades on civilians driving their cars to work or anywhere else in broad daylight. This has created a interesting dilemma, interesting from a legal standpoint, of what a war crime is. If it's not done with a person like with a gun in their hand, how do you track the person doing the crime via drone with a radio frequency connection? It's kind of I've read an article on it. It was kind of interesting. It creates a legal dilemma for a lot of prosecutors to bring any charges forth. It's like,
I have an idea.
Go ahead.
We find who uploaded the video and what unit it is, and then work from there.
Right. Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
all the combat footage we have with these civilian casualties were uploaded on Telegram.
Okay. So,
but it's the thing with getting to fucking Russia. Like, what are you gonna do? Fly there and arrest tens of thousands?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, unless it's like a complete occupation, and assuming there's some nuclear war scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess really the thing is making sure these people aren't able to ever leave Russia ever again.
Basically, yeah. Leave them on that island. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I found out why this stream is not going on YouTube there, but I'll look at that in a minute. Talked about the chemical usage here. It's mainly tear gas and chloropicrin, which we tested on ourselves in the military because that was so much fun. We talked about the U.S. military aid suspension, and supposedly it was related to a lot of missiles, mainly Patriot interceptors, Gimlers, and some artillery. But there's an article from Military Yarny said that it didn't affect everything, just a lot of the high-profile stuff, which America still sends out. Previous aid gaps enabled Russian gains in Avdiivka and Pokrovsk, and we're all very familiar with the risks when Trump decides to have a fit about sending military aid, which was earmarked for Ukraine. Anyway, in a weird hunch, I have no proof of this, but based off how badly Hegseth has also been acting and how much he's also a retard about things, I wouldn't put it past Hegseth to just like do this and then Trump back his boy up. Hegseth just having a hard-on for hating Ukraine said, fuck it, we're going to review all these weapons we're sending over to Ukraine, so we're just going to delay it even more, that sort of thing. I think that's a possibility, but it's entirely speculative. I have no evidence of that, but that's just off of his incompetence and leaking his chat crap before and all this other stuff. So anyway, Trump and Putin had a call on July 3rd. Trump called the conversation unproductive, stating Putin was, quote, not looking to stop. Putin insisted on eliminating the root cause of the war, which is again rolling back NATO to their 1991 borders. And in the meantime, Russia struck Kyiv and other cities just hours after the call. So that's why Trump is saying that Putin's just basically bloodthirsty, which only took him so long to learn that, but that's what you do with a 70-year-old man. Strategic killings in Russia, in the Russian rear. So this guy right here was the deputy commander of the Russian Navy, which is interesting. He was in Kursk, but he was killed by a HIMARS strike. Yeah, so this was Major General Gudkov. So he credit to Ukraine again, knocking out some major leadership in the Russian military. And a suspected FSB assassination occurred in Moscow via car bombings, possibly targeting the FSB 5th Directorate Chief Alexei Komkov. I don't have any footage of that, but that was also reported, though. So, Russia targeting their own 5th... So it's FSB targeting the FSB 5th Directorate Chief. I don't know. Maybe it's Chechens doing Chechen things. I don't know. There's a lot of weird shit going on in Russia we can't always account for. So that was just interesting to share with you guys. Okay, last couple slides here, guys. Talk about mobilization and some rear area activity. Worsening personnel crisis evident in the Rostat data suppression. Russia's national Rostat we talked about being suppressed. This strongly suggests that Kremlin is attempting to hide mounted combat losses, particularly among draft-age males. and maybe preparing for another wave of mobilization. That's something that ISW does talk about a lot, but I'm not really going to back them up on that one. I just don't see how it's politically feasible, and consistently Putin has been pushing back against that. With their unemployment rate being 2.4%, they just don't have the people. And at this point, if they're going to pull people into a mobilization of 500,000 or 1,000,000 people, they're going to be cutting down on their own production. But Russia needs war material right now. It's just not. I just don't see it in the cards. Like, they've maximized their manpower reserve as best as they can, so they're just going to keep grinding away with 25, 30,000 people a month until they think they get what they can get. So, domestic draft avoidance on the rise. A recent leak of internal FSB assessments indicates that up to 70% of eligible Russian conscripts in urban areas are dodging service via medical exemptions, bribes, and or legal deferments. The Kremlin has ordered digital integration of draft databases with the national banking system and the Ministry of Interior, enabling automated enforcement via travel restrictions and bank suspensions. So if you don't sign up and answer to the army, you're persona non grata via the bank. Russian regions such as Tyumen, Ulanovsk, and Primorsky Krai have fallen short of draft quotas, despite offering bonuses equivalent to 12 to 16 months of average salary. So yeah, anyway, that's it. There is an interesting friction there going on too. The expanded use of convict labor and recruitment. So they're forming new Storm Z units of penal units out of Tatarstan, Dagestan, and Irkutsk. And foreign nationals and proxy recruitment are also increasing. There's footage from Chelabinsk and Yekaterinburg show police raiding dormitories of Uzbek and Kyrgyz workers to pressure them into signing enlistment papers. And the trend shows Kremlin is facing a demographic wall. Russia's efforts to maintain troop levels now depend on non-traditional recruits, foreign nationals, migrants, and prisoners, suggesting the labor pool is nearly exhausted. Data suppression and penal units and forced conscription reveal a state struggling to sustain its manpower without public backlash, pointing toward a looming political military bottleneck. So that's decent news. Don't know when it's going to happen, but it is worth noting. So some mobilization over in Ukraine, guys. I thought this was interesting just to kind of also include, but Ukraine is still, they do mobilize people occasionally, but the volunteer-based reserve strategy remains intact for Ukraine. Ukraine continues to emphasize voluntary enlistment and reservist contract service despite ongoing Russian pressure on all fronts. The Ministry of Defense reports that over 4,000 new recruits joined the Ukraine Armed Forces in June via digital applications or through offices of recruitment support set up in major cities. These offices aim to streamline the enlistment process and improve combat role placement, offering specialized tracks in drones, engineering, and infantry tactics. The reason why that's so important is because many people are worried, or at least the public perception is that they'll be sent to the front lines and be a trench grunt, basically. Many people want to serve, but they don't want to serve in that role. So the drone line tactic that has been invented by the Birds of Magyar is kind of helping this also. So the Ukrainians might be over leveraging the drone, but it's also just based on public perception. People want to fight, but don't want to fight in that capacity. It's kind of a balancing act. Force rotation and stabilization policy. Ukrainian commanders stated that they're actively rotating exhausted brigades, especially those in the Donetsk and Kharkiv sectors, to avoid collapse under Russian pressure. The 42nd and 57th Mechanized Brigades, for example, rotated into rear zones for rest, retraining, and equipment refit. And this effort reflects a broader Ukrainian strategy of personal preservation over territorial integrity. Volunteer-based reserve strategy remains intact. Ukraine continues to emphasize voluntary enlistment and reservist contract service despite ongoing pressure. I'm sorry, that was a double copy-paste there for me, sorry. Talk about the force rotation, and the trend shows that Ukraine maintains a voluntary and skill-based recruitment model, but force generation is now under stress from artillery and drone shortages, delays in Western aid, and constant Russian pressure across multiple fronts. So, obviously, when Trump decides to delay artillery, Gimlers, Patriot missiles, all this stuff, it simultaneously increases casualties. It's just, the more ammo you can shoot downrange, it provides you safety and cover. if you don't have concealment or cover, you shoot ammo as your cover or concealment, right? But in this case, with the way things have to work in this war, if Trump wants to stop the war, preserve lives, he needs to send ammo over there. So possibly someone's talking in his ears, presenting him the math with this and saying this is how this should work. So I'm hoping that's how it worked this time, but I'm not crossing my fingers. So, all right, last slide here, guys. Ukrainian deep strike efforts disrupt the Russian rear. We talked about the attack on Novorossiysk, and Russian strikes have degraded Ukrainian energy and logistics. The Russians escalated missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian power stations and fuel hubs near Dnipro, Vinnytsia, and Kremenchuk. Are still rolling blackouts in multiple regions, though Energo maintains partial stability with backup systems and rotating load cycles. There's also internal crackdowns and counterintelligence surge by Russia's FSB and Rosguardia. They're arresting alleged collaborators in Belgorod, Voronezh, and Tambov amid fears of sabotage and unrest. There was one article that showed a successful Ukrainian guerrilla attacks on Russian rail lines, but I don't think we'll show that though. We might have the footage. Talk about rear area militarization trends. Ukraine's expanding territorial defense roles to include drone ops, radar masking, artillery spotting, freeing up frontline brigades from those duties. And Russia's relying on penal units, foreign labor, and recruitment in occupied areas to sustain rear logistics and drone manufacturing. So that does it for the PowerPoint, guys. Let me just close out that window. And there we are. Okay. All right. Let's just pivot quickly over to the articles. Do we have anyone in chat asking any questions, Alex? Are you there? Okay.
Yeah. No,
okay.
I'm looking right now. We have nothing.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Let me go to the articles section here. Move that over. Okay. Just a couple articles here, guys. I'm not gonna bore you with too much, though we're doing pretty good on time. I'm just, again, trying to develop that tempo, which I feel is pretty good for the show. Articles. Let me make sure that's the right one. And Katarov. There we go. All right. So, this is from Medusa. Quick little, because again, Chechnya being the one major force in Russia that's left that could do another sort of Wagner-style coup, but with like way more people. It is important to track who's going to be Kadarov's son or successor. Sorry. So his son recently got married in a lavish wedding, and I guess even Jeff Bezos went to this thing. Based off one article I read.
What the fuck?
Yeah, let me just double check that, because I did see something about him saying, "Oh, this is the best wedding ever." Yeah, I don't know, dude. Jeff Bezos. I can never spell Katarov right. Katarov wedding. I just want to double check that. Katarov succession. Jeff Bezos. Katarov. Oh, sorry, my bad. Based off the Bezos was in Venice where he married. Blah blah blah. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I'm sorry about that, but I did read that somewhere. Okay. Anyway, there must have been some weird overlap in an article I read somewhere.
I remember about being as expensive.
I'm sorry, it says it right
Jeff
there.
Bezos.
My bad. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and former journalist Lauren Sanchez made headlines last week. Theirs wasn't the only wedding ceremony of the century. Okay.
That's about the price, probably, of the wedding.
Right. Yeah. Okay. My bad. Anyway, so with Ramzan Kadyrov's third son, Adam, he took over his dad's personal security and his security apparatus in Chechnya. But this, let me just show you this here.
That's not it.
Yeah.
Brown people.
Chechens are just proper hillbillies in Russia, dude. I don't care. But anyway,
yeah.
If you could see in his left hand here, guys, that's like a several $million watch. We'll just show it again here.
That's not it.
That's all. That's not silver. That's all diamonds.
Yeah.
I wish I could blow this up better, but I can't. So, but that's a entirely diamond watch, which he used in his pickup truck. Anyway, I don't know. It's just fucking
showing your nation pays.
Yeah. With his Desert Eagle.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what this one is anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's likely that Adam seems to be the successor to Ramzan Kadyrov, though. So anyway, so he had a very expensive wedding, but we don't actually know who he's marrying. That's been really kind of kept under wraps too. A lot of secrecy about that, which I found really weird. So anyway, this was an opinion piece by European Pravda, talking about some of the numbers here, because what happened with the NATO summit also is that a lot of people were successfully pushed to commit to the 3.5% GDP of core defense spending, along with the soft defense spending of 1.5%. What this article is talking about in the numbers is that European states should use that 1.5% extra to divert towards Ukraine. So the war costs about 100 billion US every year, effectively covered by international support. Of international support, about 40 billion per year have come from the US. Europe would have to take over the rest of it with an additional 30 to 40 billion per year for Ukrainian arms production. There's also amount of slack in Ukrainian arms production. If they could get another 15 to 20 billion dollars, Ukrainian weapons production would be maximized. So they're just basically trying to meet up that goal for the rest of the year. So they're asking for more funds. But with the amount of funds and what the GDP increase would look like, would be these 110 to 120 billion are about 0.6% of the GDP of European NATO nations. So it's well within that 1.5% extra that that European nations could spend, that could send it over to Ukraine and say it's part of that soft defense spending. Anyway, so if Europe gives 0.6% of its GDP to Ukraine, this can stop Russia in Ukraine and hamper Russian penetration for attacking Europe. So, hard numbers right there. Thought that was worth showing to you guys, because the EU is a huge economy, and they can easily do that now with all the prerequisites they now have set up for themselves in their defense spending. So, I'm hoping to see some sort of investment and future growth from that sector. This was an article talking about Russians being rotated back into the front after their exchange as POWs. I'll just give you the highlight here. As long as he's still there, which is Ukrainian prison, he's safe. This guy's wife admitted that although her husband is finally nearing the front of the exchange queue for the first time in over a year of waiting, she no longer wants it to happen. Quote, he nearly spent half a year he's been in captivity just trying to find him. Along this goes off with talking about his command not talking if he's MIA, KIA, or WIA. She finally found out that he was a POW, and now that he's being in the exchange, he's being sent back to the front despite attempting to commit suicide. Has had shrapnel in his back, a fucked up leg, some other stuff. Anyway, so that I just wanted to share that with you guys because that is the state from even some of the media we're getting out of Russia. People want to stay in Ukrainian internment as prisoners until the war's over. At least by some accounts on this article here, Russians again are being sent to the front to go and die because they're expendable. Because there are a lot of mobilized people. That's the target demographic that's being sent back to that, along with the prisoners. But if their families can get a hold of them and try to push them to stay as POWs, they want them not to be in those exchange lists. Which, again, consequently, because it's usually one for one, which means if that is successful, that there will be less Ukrainian POWs coming back home. Yeah, this is the morality of this war. It's uncomfortable, but that is the way these things are working. So the Russians want their people to be captured and not sent on these assaults, but at the same time, the Ukrainians still need to rip. Anyway, you guys, you know what I'm talking about. So as far as like the Luhansk Cossack Cadets Corps, this was before the occupation. This was an institution, the Luhansk Oblast Lyceum. It was for military and physical training for the cadet corps named after the heroes of the Young Guard. But long story short, guys, this is basically what the Americans would call an elementary school to high school curriculum. Starts from grades 5 to 11. This basically from ages 9 to 10 to 17. And basically, this grooms kids to join the civil service or enroll in military academies or enlist in the army, where they will eventually go to fight against Ukraine in the ranks of the Russian army or Russian Cossack units. Some of these teachers, like this one lady right here, She used to have Ukrainian language books in some of her pictures, but after being taken over by the Luhansk People's Republic, she basically did a 180 and decided to LARP as a Russian. So this is some of the people that are going to these military academies and kind of brainwashing a lot of these kids. Quote, I believe that the sooner our boys understand what military service is and what it means to defend their homeland in these difficult times, the better, Daria explained, which is that lady. They will leave the Corps prepared and trained in the most important thing, defending their land. Okay.
What?
Yeah.
It's Orwellian.
It's kind of crazy. This guy was is a director that helped set up this whole thing. He worked as a physical education teacher at the Lyceum, if I'm saying that right. But he's also had law enforcement agencies and criminal proceedings brought against him in absentia, if I'm saying that right. They bring in war veterans to talk about the war, kind of impress themselves upon these young kids. Yeah, anyway, I just wanted to share with you guys, and I think they graduate about 70 students per year. According to Rashivka, there are about 40 caustic candidate classes operating in 30 schools, along with 3 police cadet classes, some other attendant classes. Quote, I've observed a disturbing trend. Luhansk has become a kind of hub for luring children from newly occupied territories. For instance, cadets from Luhansk-based Corps or investigative committee classes often travel to Kherson and encourage children to move first to occupy Luhansk and then further into the Russian Federation. So this is part of that um, abduction of Ukrainian children to be absorbed into the Russian demographic. Um, this obviously is not right, it's not lawful, but this is what the Russians are doing too. They're trying to again, because I feel like I'm not delivering the impact I need when I say like military patriotic education system. Like it's just so dry and academic from the nerds at ISW. But
it's
like
Russification brainwashing.
It is exactly so.
More or less what it is.
Yeah.
Abandoning your culture and everything and values and replace it with ours, or you'll be sent to prison and raped.
Yeah,
that's the goal of it.
Yeah, or you'll go join the Ukrainian Nazis. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's that article there, guys. I'll put that in the chat if you guys are interested. I know it is a bit of a read, but it is worth reading. I'll put that in the Odyssey chat here. I'll get to your comment there in a minute, David Smith, because I do have a couple other things I just want to touch on briefly. China did have a chat with the EU. It tells the EU that it will not allow Russia to lose its war against Ukraine. This is from the South China Morning Post. Let me make sure that's on the OBS there. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has stated that Beijing cannot allow Russia to be defeated in the war against Ukraine during 4 hours of talks with Kaja Kallas, who is the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. Again, this is from the South China Morning Post. Details include sources reporting that during closed-door meeting with Kallas, Wang Yi said that Russia's defeat is unacceptable to Beijing. He explained this position by expressing concern that the United States would then fully shift its attention to China. So part of them, they want the Americans to be distracted as little as we are with the European war. The statement effectively confirms that what many in Brussels consider to be Beijing's real stance, although officially China continues to assert that it is, quote, is not a party in this conflict, unquote. Anyway, so that's that. So you have more or less what can be considered an official statement by the Chinese government, I guess. Anyway. So this is a bit of activism. I want our UK bros to get on here. I found this last week. There was a proposal to send decommissioned warrior IFEs to Ukraine. It was rejected, at least tacitly right now. The UK Ministry of Defense has rejected a proposal to transfer surplus warrior infantry vehicles to Ukraine, citing concerns over cost, suitability, and added burden to Ukraine's logistic and training systems, which I find to be a fucking cop-out. The decision was reported by the UK Defense Journal, quote, warrior infantry fighting vehicles are key platforms for the British Army to meet defense commitments. Although small numbers are scheduled for disposal, these will have been selected in line with serviceability and suitable for role. As such, with sustainable investment, they're not likely to offer significant capability to Ukraine, and providing such small numbers would only increase the diversity of Ukraine's armored vehicle fleet, increasing the logistic and training burdens. This is the evil of politics. They will speak truths, but not acknowledge the actual truth is that this will save more lives. which is obviously the priority for Ukraine. Um, as of 2024, the British operated 632 Warrior vehicles in multiple variants, including IFVs, command and artillery recon, repair and recovery, and fire control. As of 2025, 359 of these 632 remain in service. The formal retirement process is expected to begin in 2027, with full decommissioning by 2030, and additional 80 vehicles deemed to be in the poorest condition are slated disposal this year. However, before scrapping, they'll be used as sources for spare parts to the remaining fleet. Anyway, this offers frontal protection against 25 Mike armor-piercing rounds and 14.5 millimeter rounds around the perimeter. There's also add-on kits and this whole sort of thing. So these are, again, bottom of the barrel, but there is a way we can help, guys. And I know our community is willing to do this, though, so I'm going to put this in our Odyssey and Rumble chats. There is a petition. Let me make sure that's on the screen there. We have to reach 100,000 signatures. There was about 200 in last week from last time I saw this. Before we can get a statement from Parliament about delivering these to Ukraine. I think that's to be done by October 25th is our deadline. So it's a few more months, but if there's this definite push by the Ukrainian community in UK and other places, we can push that over the line. So for Natsock Saxing especially, I know he has friends in many places, send out the petition. It's just things are going to be disposed in garbage by the UK military. If anything, it's going to be putting resources to good use. So there's that petition. I put it in the Rumble and Odyssey chats there, guys. Please share that around as much as you can. All right. Okay, so last couple things here, guys. Well, going to the combat footage, though, but there was some combat footage I want to show here, though, of just Ukrainians successfully destroying a Russian train line here. Again, this was done by guerrillas, not normal forces. As soon as it shows a wider shot here, I'll explain a little bit more. So you can see the main engine here was destroyed, or at least tossed off the side here because of that breach in the line there. So what they did was, as soon as it backs out here a little bit more, they got it on a curve. So it's hard for any train operator or conductor to see the curvature of the line, and that's exactly where you want it to be, in a forest, on a curve where they can't see it and react quickly enough. But obviously it derailed the engine and caused to back up a lot of these trains, which fucked up Russian logistics for a while. So that's good. Just thought that was cool to share. Last couple things here, guys. We did talk about the U.S. arms supply halt, so I'll jump past this here. But on top of that, because we have good relations with Nix, with what happened last week with Elon Musk saying he wants to create the American Patriot Party or whatever it was, or American Party, I don't forget what it was.
This America Party, I think, is what.
Whatever.
It was.
Yeah. Okay. The American Party. And Anduril.
Still fucking basic.
Yeah, basic bitch things. And Anduril being kind of one of these tech bro companies because they specialize in AI and drones and stuff. Him saying that the U.S. should arm Ukraine is a definite rhetorical inflection I want to kind of touch on, though. Long story short, he says the U.S. should give them the tools they need to win. Is the fastest path to peace, one way or another. Basically, he would like to send over his Altea 600M and Altea 700M kamikaze UAVs, as well as the Roadrunner M jet-powered interceptor drones. He basically wants to test his product against Russians. There's nothing really benevolent about it.
Experience deal. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is interesting.
Those strings.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, I'm not saying this is a good guy though, but definitely would probably help in some capacity because this is one of the leading AI companies, and what we've been seeing with AI being, being a software add-on to many drones, and us opening up our R&D section of things in the United States would definitely be what's the right term? Force multiplier for the Ukrainian drone force. So that's good. And Anduril is kind of one of those up-and-coming defense companies that is looking to overturn the giants like Lockheed, Grumman, some of the others, Boeing, So they're definitely hungry and young and trying to expand, and they're definitely making waves. So drones being kind of one of the big up-and-coming markets in the future, that's something to look at. Last couple things here, guys. Just a quick one. Alliance of Auto Giants. There's the Arquis and Daimler seek to create new military trucks for France. If you guys have a little bit of extra money to toss in the stock market, I'm kind of just tracking that on my own. These are two companies that are looking to upgrade the latest in French wheeled vehicles in their military. So just keep a track of that. And the last thing, we'll end on a high note here. Third Army Corps has an updated strength count. So we talked about the 60th Mechanized Brigade entering the Corps, but they're also building a new unmanned systems regiment within the Corps. And let me see here. They're also creating their 4th Medical Battalion and a new anti-air missile regiment named Aquila. They're obviously getting that from 40K. Has been identified within the Corps. Like the Medical Battalion, the anti-aircraft missile division belongs to the 3rd Assault Brigade, was elevated to a Corps level unit, now becoming a regiment. The Recon Battalion of the brigade is now established as a separate unit within the Corps. The unit retains its structure and includes units such as Tempest Group, a foreign formation that had been founded by members of Chosen Company. So I thought that was worth mentioning because, from my understanding, Chosen Company has basically dissolved. We talked about that last week when one of their leaders was saying he just couldn't abide bad commanders in the National Legion. So some of those guys have moved over to 3rd Assault. So I thought that was pretty cool. The Corps is estimated to have a strength of 50,000 personnel, with the 3rd Assault Brigade itself reportedly numbering over 10,000. That's just one, right, guys? So between all the other units, it's pretty cool to see Azov growing militarily like that. There's also rumor that Kraken is moving into the 3rd Assault Corps also. So, yeah, sorry. Both posts, we have honored Kraken's request to remove a section about them from our original story. So anyway, yeah, I did so. Yeah, I'm sorry. This got updated and deleted. Yeah. Anyway, thought that was cool, and that leaves us with the presentation there done, guys. Yeah, and that was done. Yeah, it was done in good time. Okay, I'm feeling good about the time we're spending on that. Let me just check out on chat here, guys. We'll address Odyssey as usual. First, again, good to see you again. Hadrian was right. David Smith says, thanks for the PowerPoint. Not sure if others have a problem, but I find the text too small to read unless I watch in full screen. Not a big deal since you talk about it anyway. I'm sorry, I could talk about that too, but it's as big as I can get it without like just let me show. I'm sorry, I'm gonna kind of just do a little behind the scenes talk with you guys here about this though. Let me just find my PowerPoint again here and show it to you and open it up first. And okay, so with say a presentation like this, yeah, I get it's a lot of words, but if I go just to like the bottom of the headline stack here, I can do things with a few things. Usually the way I can aggregate this data now with AI assistance is I can get a talking point and 2 support points. And I'm not going to just leave that as one slide because that's like, what's the point? So this is kind of like the bottom of the stack headlines, but if I want to talk about bigger things, I know like this one's kind of hard to read, but then I have to present the media material here, obviously on the right, and then try to present a little bit of text though, at least some highlights about the subject matter. I'm doing my best with what I got though. I mean, PowerPoint's an imperfect presentation model to say the least, but I mean, talking about like Russian, I mean, it's there's a lot of little details I need to go over though. Maybe somebody better than me can do better with PowerPoint, but 3 years I'm doing the best with the skills I've acquired. So, talking about it obviously does help present the information a bit better, but I don't expect people to read a PowerPoint presentation on Rumble or Odyssey for an hour and a half or an hour a week, right? So that's why I try to touch the highlights and present it as a media in word and visual presentation there. So that's my thinking. Let me just check on Rumble here. Nothing new. Entropy is 65 views. Wow. Okay. Well, hi. Sorry, Entropy. It's good to see you all over there. That's the highest I've ever seen it over there.
For impressions or?
No, it has eyeballs on it. It's like concurrent views, I think. Because over on,
Oh.
let me check here on X, we're at 0. So that's interesting. Okay. Anyway.
Okay.
Usually we get more. But anyway. Okay. I think that does it for everything. Do you have any closing thoughts, Alex, before we go to intermission and come out the other side with combat footage?
No.
Okay. All right, guys. We got a few minutes here for intermission. Go grab a smoke, a drink. For everyone else over on, I'm trying to remember all the places I have to close out here. For YouTube, go and join us on Odyssey and Rumble, because things will get a little bit more spicy. We talk about politics a little bit more, and yeah, that's just where all the fun is on the back half of the show. So good night and